Thank you for tuning in to part 3 of the River Dams group. This section will cover the Oahe Dam. We will be talking today about where the Oahe Dam is located, the specifics of the dam. We'll look at pictures and facts, then we'll look at the Native American point of view, and finally the conclusion. For your reference, this is a map of the state of South Dakota and surrounding states. This map indicates with colored stars different cities in the state, as well as the distance from USF to the Oahe Dam, which is approximately 230 miles. The Pixel and Flood Control Act of 1944 is U.S. legislation that authorized construction of numerous dams and modifications to previously existing dams, as well as levees across the United States. This act had 6 intents, which were hydropower recreation, water supply, navigation, flood control, and fishing and wildlife. I used an inflation calculator to determine the cost of the dam in 2020, which is almost $3 trillion. The original project cost was $340 million. Construction of this dam started in 1948 by the Army Corps of Engineers and ended in 1952. Reservoir filling began August of 1958 and reached the minimum operating level in April of 1962. Dedication happened by President JFK in August of 1962. The Oahe Dam is an embankment dam, which is a large artificial dam. It's typically created by placement and compaction of complex semi-plastic mounds of various compositions of soil, sand, clay, and/or rock. The Oahe Dam is the 45th largest reservoir in the world and 4th largest in the United States, measuring at 9,300 feet long, 245 feet high, and 3,500 feet wide. The dam volume is 93,122,000 cubic yards, which is over 18 trillion gallons. The Oahe Dam in August of 1962 started using hydroelectricity, which served the states of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Montana. It created recreational use along 50 areas with access to Lake Oahe, including boating, marinas, campgrounds, picnic areas, hiking trails, and spots for hunting and fishing. An annual report from the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks said that Lake Oahe supported between 94,000 and 338,000 angler days, meaning that's how many days you can go fish there, and contributed to more than 6.3 and to between $6.3 and $22.7 million annually to local and regional economies. This is a picture of the location where the dam was before construction started. And the next few pictures are just pictures of when the construction was happening. Feel free to pause and take a look at these pictures for a longer period of time if you so wish. This is a picture of intake control towers as they're being built. And this is what they look like when they're finished. This is the dam and reservoir. And this is the reservoir when it is close to full. I like this picture because it's a diagram of what every piece in the picture is. So you might want to pause and take a look at that. Moving on to the Native American perspective of the dam, in January of 1960, the United States Army Corps of Engineers evicted 190 Indian families on the Standing Rock Reservation in the dead of winter, with temperatures reaching below 31 degrees below zero. These families were forced to gather their possessions and evacuate their land touching the Missouri River. The Corps of Engineers declared this land would soon be flooded by the Oahe Dam and considered this emergent. Indian families were crowded into cold trailer houses, which were maintained at their own expense because the permanent housing wasn't prepared, nor had the government made funds available for relocation and construction. This hardship was entirely unnecessary. The eviction date established by the Corps was arbitrary, and there were several more months before the dam started flooding. The Oahe Dam is said to have improved flood control, irrigation, and navigation, and benefit the general public, but the Indians on the reservation always seem to get the short end of the stick and not receive the same or even close to the same benefits offered to whites. One question that keeps coming up in all of the articles that I've read is, were the dams actually necessary? In an article posted on the South Dakota Historical Society website written by Michael Lawson, he states, flooding was seldom a serious problem on the Standing Rock Reservation prior to construction of the Oahe Dam. However, the rise in the maximum pool level of the reservoir has now created water to infringe on Indian land and has never been purchased by the federal government. Fluctuation of the water level and reservoir has created a far greater hazard to Indian livestock and other resources than any of the infrequent previous floods have in the past. The Pick-Sloan Plan, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Bureau of Reclamation caused hardships to nearly every tribe with lands along the Missouri River. The Oahe Dam flooded 160,000 acres of Indian land on the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River reservations in North and South Dakota. The Standing Rock Sioux could have received direct hydroelectric benefits from the Oahe project, but they weren't given that option. But the Pick-Sloan Plan definitely increased availability to white communities on the Missouri Basin. This is crazy, as in the 1970s, only about 30% of homes on the reservation had electricity. And if lack of electricity isn't enough, the Oahe project was the development of water supply for municipal, industrial, and domestic uses. The treatment plant supplies good potable water for Lake Oahe, but the outlying reservation still depended on groundwater, which typically exceeds standards for maximum impurities. The forced relocation took away the best land and resources. The land the Indians were moved to was inferior, non-worked land. Indian lands kept getting smaller and smaller due to no fault of their own. In March of 1889, the Great Sioux Reservation was reduced consistently. The original land was over 2.3 million acres, and by 1951 was short of 1 million acres, and in the 1970s was reduced even further to approximately 844 acres. The Oahe Dam and Reservation project created a reservoir larger than Lake Ontario and deeper than Lake Erie. It is the largest reservoir in the Missouri River, stretching over 250 miles to Bismarck, North Dakota. The Oahe River and Reservoir and Dam produced the largest hydroelectric power plant and the second largest dam in reservoir capacity of all the Corps of Engineers projects. The Oahe Dam flooded more than Indian land than any other government project, 56,000 acres of Standing Rock Reservation, and 100,000 acres on the Cheyenne River Reservation. Treaty rights of the Indians proved that land could be taken without their consent. None of the affected tribes were consulted prior to the Pick-Sloan Plan, and in most cases construction began on the dams, including those on Indian property, before formal negotiations were opened with tribal representatives. The Missouri Basin Investigations Project began in 1947 and was designed to aid both Indians and the government in determining the extent of damages from the dam and reservoir. The Standing Rock Sioux first learned in full detail the effects of the Oahe Dam on their reservation. 55,994 acres took the most fertile and most forested land. over 190 Indian families, which is approximately 1/3 of the resident population, were removed. Their most valuable cattle ranges, ranch lands, most of their gardens, nearly all timber, wild fruit, and wildlife resources were destroyed. Not to mention, 5 cemeteries and private graves were relocated or lost completely. While one of the main points of the lake and reservoir were fishing, the Native Americans had never learned how to use this food source, and water recreation wasn't applicable. This quote was written by Michael Lawson, and I just think it's so profound. They were immensely incensed that the U.S. was again so willing to breach the faith of its solemn treaty obligations and sacrifice the interests of the Indians in order to satisfy the white man's desire for progress. How would this make you feel? And how true is that with everything that we've read so far this semester? It just seems like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just horrible. In 1950, Congress enacted legislation that established guidelines for negotiation of a settlement for Indian lands taken by the Oahe Dam project in South Dakota. The legislation made the Army Corps of Engineers and the Secretary of Interior responsible for negotiating favorable settlements with the tribes. The legislation required that the settlement include payment for Indian land and improvements as well as for relocation costs. The Standing Rock Sioux in 1951 attempted to hire their own attorney to be paid out of tribal funds to help with negotiations regarding lands taken in the Big Sloan Dam projects. The tribe wanted legal counsel, which would be totally independent from the politics of the Department of the Interior. However, the Commissioner of the Indian Affairs, Dylan Myers, rejected their choice of an attorney and allowed only a 1-year contract. The representatives from the Standing Rock Sioux paid their own way because the BIA would only allow them 5 days in Washington, which was not enough time to cut through the federal bureaucracy. The representatives also realized that Congress was more comfortable hearing from Indian stereotypes than real Indians. Thus, Little Cloud was instructed to speak in Lakota at all the hearings, and Chasing Hawk was required to translate his remarks into broken English, even though both men spoke their adopted language fluently. That's ridiculous. In the end, Congress awarded the Cheyenne River Sioux nearly $11 million, which was $13 million less than what the Indians felt was just compensation for their loss. 2 weeks after the Oahe Dam was closed and the reservoir began filling, Congress passed a settlement which provided a little more than $12 million to the Standing Rock Sioux, which was $14 million less than they had requested. In 1988, the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe announced that they would no longer recognize South Dakota hunting license in the Oahe Dam project area and that hunters must obtain a tribal hunting license. Congress authorized in 1992 nearly $91 million to the Standing Rock Sioux in compensation for damages that caused by the Oahe Dam project. The legislation also established an irrigation area on the reservation and transferred the administrative jurisdiction of the land taken in the project from the Secretary of the Army, which is the Army Corps of Engineers, to the Secretary of Interior, which is the BIA. So, how do you feel now? Let's take a look at some of the pictures that we looked at before. And I want you to really look at these pictures and think to yourself, how do I feel about this now? Do you see them differently? Are you feeling the way you did? Well, that concludes the 3rd video of Lake Oahe, and I hope you tune into the next video, which is about Big Bend and our conclusion of our project. Thanks for watching.